In this lesson, we'll focus on distorting the jaw of our male subject to extend beyond what is humanly possible. So let's go ahead and dive back in. Alright, so we're going to continue on manipulating and distorting our male subject to create our photorealistic fantasy concept. Again, we're wanting to create a character that looks kind of like a goblin or an orc. Ultimately, something that looks very nasty and just aggressive, alright? So in the previous lesson, we basically started with the nose. We manipulated it in Liquify, just sizing it down and pushing it up. And we want to continue on basically manipulating all the additional facial features so that they feel just a lot less human, all right? And we're going to focus now on just lowering the jaw. So if we go ahead and refer back to our concept sketch, we can kind of get a sense of how we want our jaw to look like. Again, we have it very elongated, and this is going to allow us to eventually show off his really gross, nasty mouth, where we're going to have just a lot of jagged teeth, just real crooked, sharp, jagged teeth. Okay, so what we'd like to do at this point is preserve the state in which we've manipulated his head, just in case we need to come back to it. So we're going to go ahead and duplicate our nose layer, just right-clicking and going to duplicate layer. And we'll call this layer jaw. All right. So we're going to jump back into Liquify. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be spending a lot of time in Liquify. And just in Liquify, we have a lot of powerful tools in here that allows us to really move information around, distort it to various degrees. So let's go ahead and zoom in here now that we're in our Liquify dialog box. And I don't want to affect any of the information basically from the upper teeth upward, okay? We don't want to affect the nose that we spent so much time kind of resizing and repositioning. So we're going to use our freeze mask tool once again. Go ahead and size our brush way down. And we'll just kind of mask out all that information just right above those upper teeth. All right, so that's about right. So now we can grab our forward warp tool once again. And if you recall, we used this tool to basically move his nose upward. So we're going to go ahead and just kind of adjust the position of our head here. And let's go ahead and size our brush way up. And just a little bit larger. And we'll start to pull his lower jaw downwards. Now we're going to get just a little bit of stretching. That's kind of unavoidable, but that's okay. It's better than having all that information up there, risking having that pulled down just yet. Now we can reduce the size of our brush, tip just a little bit here. In fact, we're going to want to bring it down quite a bit. And I'm going to reduce the brush density. Again, this basically allows us to control the brush edge strength. And I can kind of focus on refining that jaw just a little bit more clearly just by adjusting the brush density. So basically the power of the brush becomes more concentrated towards that crosshair, that little plus sign in the center of our cursor there. So this allows me just to kind of get in here and kind of fine-tune how we stretch this jaw and ultimately how we stretch the mouth as well. Okay, and if I feel like that chin is just a little bit pointed, we can kind of rein that back in, bring that back up. But I'm liking kind of how that's looking. We can go ahead and resize our brush down a little bit more just to kind of clean up any little bit of bumpiness we have there. All right, that's looking pretty nice. Let's go ahead and commit to these changes. Okay, so we've basically distorted his jaw, we've brought it way down, and now what we want to do is basically just kind of clean up any of this little bit of stretched information in here. As you recall, in my previous lesson, I mentioned that I want to preserve the skin pores as we go, as we make these distortions, rather than trying to do all of it on the back end of the project. And we want to preserve the skin because it's going to prove very useful, especially when we start integrating additional textures and photographic elements into the skin. If the skin is all stretched out, it's just going to really flatten out the image when we start to do that, okay? So we're going to come back to our healing brush tool. And just to reiterate what the healing brush tool does for us is it matches the texture, lighting, and transparency of the pixels as we basically sample from one area and paint them over the areas that we want to heal, all right? Now, this is a great example of sampling from too far out. Those pixels don't make sense right there. So you do want to stay relatively close to the areas that you're wanting to heal. So just kind of sampling from kind of the surrounding areas. So it's a great tool in just kind of basically cleaning up areas that have been kind of stretched out. So we have a little bit of stretching just kind of over here to the screen right of his face, or the left side of his face, if you're thinking about it in reverse. And we got a little bit of distortion here on just the sides of his mouth as well. So again, I just kind of want to clean up these skin pores as we go. Okay, so that's looking a lot better. Now I'm kind of looking at his jaw, and I may want to kind of adjust this side just a little bit more, kind of bring it in towards the mouth just a little bit more. So let's go ahead and just jump back into Liquify. And we can grab our forward warp tool one more time. I'm just sizing up my brush. We'll go ahead and keep the density pretty low. I'll just kind of pull that in just a little bit. It feels like it's a little bit too wide given how he's stretching it down. And we can go ahead and kind of zoom in there. All right, so I'm liking how that's looking a lot better. We'll go ahead and continue on with our healing brush tool. I'm just kind of noticing a few additional areas here where I just want to bring over those skin pores. Again, I'm trying to avoid any kind of major stretching. Now, if there's a specific area where we feel like the healing brush tool isn't carrying over pixels exactly the way we want it, we can use our clone stamp tool, which is straight up clones exactly what we sample from. There's no trying to integrate it in based off of transparency, lighting, or texture. So sometimes I'll do that as well. I may want to kind of clean up a little bit of this information just right kind of around the corners of the mouth. All right. So what we're going to do in the next lesson is basically focus on the interior of the mouth. We have a little bit of stretching in here, and that was really unavoidable just based off of how little information we had to go with as far as the tongue goes. In fact, if we go back to our base head, we didn't really have a whole lot of tongue there to really work with. So what we're going to do in the next lesson is basically focus on just intensifying the overall mouth. We're going to change up the teeth to make them look just a lot more jagged and aggressive. And we're also going to kind of repaint and kind of redefine and retexture the tongue. So stick around as we continue to evolve our male subject here into a really nasty, gruesome fantasy character. So we'll see you then.